Oh man, I love the Clash, dude. I can't tell you how much I love the Clash. It's such a good band. Oh man, I've been listening to them a lot recently, actually, just because there's something about them, something about how mad they are. You know, they're just upset about the present situation, or they were. Unfortunately, Joe Strummer passed away in, I think, 1999, so he's no longer with us. But the Clash, during their short-lived existence as a band, really were very prominent. I don't agree with them on everything politically, but it's a different era. It was a different era at that time when somewhat mainstream, I don't mean completely mainstream, but somewhat mainstream, bands which saw a wide audience anyway, would do something political that actually meant something. You know, they were taking a stand against at the time, Thatcherism and all the problems that arose from that, and against the Falklands War and all that sort of thing. And it was really interesting to see the stands that they took. I mean, the very hardcore, controversial political stuff that was in mainstream music at the time. And we really don't see that much anymore. You know, nowadays it's so, I don't know if corporate's the word, because it was back then too, but it's just so watered down. It's all about, you know, go out and party all day. And I know it was that way back then too. It's just that it doesn't seem like hardcore political commentary really makes much of an appearance on the main stage. You know, you're not going to see some sort of political protest against the Iraq War at Riverbend. You know, you're just not going to see that like you'd see a protest against Vietnam back in the 70s and 60s, or more 60s. But it's just odd to me how that's changed so much, how music has changed so much just in the last, not that long, actually. You know, I mean, yeah, you had Rage Against the Machine in the 2000s, but they're not really around that much anymore either. In fact, I don't think they're still together as a band. Well, the closest thing we've had to any sort of mainstream hardcore discussion about politics, I guess, in the last while has been Rand Paul talking about the NSA and his filibuster, which some are saying was not a filibuster. Rand Paul did a small sort of filibuster on the geez, I lost it, on the NSA. There we go. I'm typing it out here as I'm talking. He did a small filibuster on the NSA that lasted about 10 hours, I'm wanting to say, and he seized the political moment with this NSA protest, and it's really something that needed to be done. We're not seeing a whole lot about this in mainstream news, and that's what's driving me nuts. You know, as much as they can claim that they're not mainstream, cable news definitely is mainstream media. I don't know how they can possibly make the claim that they're not. Just because they're not on a major network doesn't mean they're not. I mean, on the one hand, they say they're the most watched cable news station, and then on the other hand, they say that they're not mainstream news. I'm not sure how they can say that, but anyway, no matter what network it's on, they're not really wanting to talk a whole lot about this, because there still are people in mainstream media and on cable news who support the Patriot Act, who support the NSA spying. There are still people who support this. I can think of one very prominent radio show host who we carry here, even possibly, who was talking about the NSA programs and the Patriot Act as being this great thing during the Bush presidency. Pardon me. But then when Mr. Obama came into office, now it's just the worst thing ever. He's not holding to his morals, and if he has any, he's not holding to any sort of principle. It's just whatever is the evil of the day, whatever's the boogeyman of today. It's not about morals or any sort of a sense of ethics or anything like that to a lot of these people. It's just about, it's just about whatever the political hot button issue of the day is, and it's such a shame that we keep having that, and that's so the case so often, where people just be upset about the political occasion of the day as opposed to what the actual issue is. The issue is, of course, government, the state. That's the problem. The Patriot Act is a problem, but the cause of the problem is the state. But nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to really talk about that, because to say that would be to cause a anti-state narrative, and we really can't have that, because the state doesn't really do much of anything wrong, right? Like, that's the narrative that is wanting to be pushed, and that's a narrative that these people are all too happy to cater to, because I'm sure they get a lot of money to do that. Well, I don't get a lot of money, and I'm happy that way. I don't get a lot of money to talk about political issues. In fact, I'm not paid by anybody to talk about political issues, and I'm fine with that, because then that means I'm free to say what I'm going to say. And what I'm going to say is the Patriot Act is not good, and NSA spying is not good. And this is probably a no-brainer for most people anyway. But shame on these people who have changed their opinions so quickly on these issues. It's really ridiculous. Well, Rand Paul knows a political opening for his presidential campaign when he sees one, of course. Kentucky Senator's latest filibuster-style stand against the government surveillance positions him as the bane of Big Brother and puts him at the center of a high-profile national security debate as support for the post 9/11 security state seems to be fraying. And we definitely do have a surveillance state post 9/11, and people are all too happy to support that at the time because it was the patriotic thing, right? Well, patriotism tends to not be a very good answer to a lot of different problems because patriotism is just on the cusp of nationalism, and we all know where that gets you. Well, Paul's maneuvering is not without its risks. Critics, including rivals in the 2016 GOP nominating race, warn his grandstanding is dangerous and is sowing chaos in the Senate that could result in a key spying program going dark at the same time that ISIS is rising, stoking Americans' fears. Well, of course, ISIS is the great American boogeyman, and we have to all be afraid of this grandstanding boogeyman that's on our doorstep constantly, just as Al-Qaeda was back in the 2000s, and just like the Mujahideen were back in that time as well, and probably just like the Soviets were back in the 80s and 90s and 70s and the 60s, and as the Nazis were in the 30s and 40s, and before then as the Huns were in the 1910s, and before then as the British were, or as the French imperialists were, or whatever the boogeyman was of that era. It doesn't particularly matter because it's all the same idea. But the problem is that this grandstanding is really not going to get us anywhere. It's just going to hold us back as a populace to constantly live in fear of whatever the next boogeyman is going to be. So the solution, of course, is to keep us all under the thumb of the state. And that's obviously not any sort of real solution. Still, Paul certainly saw as many political opportunities as costs when he spent more than 10 hours on Wednesday standing on the Senate floor, shod in sneakers for comfort, of course, railing against the National Security Agency's bulk data collection. Paul claimed political stardom in the Republican Party by standing up to big government and remains wildly popular among his young libertarian slice of the conservative movement for his ideological convictions. Now, I'm actually not the biggest fan of Rand Paul. That's kind of the funny thing. I think he's a good guy, just like I think Marco Rubio is kind of a good guy. And I think Ted Cruz is a good guy, and all that sort of thing. And Bernie Sanders seems like an okay guy to hang out with. But I don't really think I support his bid for president, mostly because I don't support the idea of a president at all. But it's difficult for me because he is saying some of the right things, but it makes me wonder if he's just saying the right things, if that makes any sense. Now, I'm sure he's a man of character, and he certainly seems to be that way. But it is kind of difficult when I really don't support the idea of a president, period. And so having this guy running for president sort of puts me in a weird position. But he is looking to widen his constituency beyond his traditional base, and the Republican parties as well. And American skepticism over the NSA may help him to do just that, given that he appears to have stalled behind frontrunners like Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush in most polls of the Republican race. Paul's White House hopes Paul's White House hopes would certainly benefit from a boost. At the heart of Paul's case is a claim that the NSA is violating the constitutional rights of Americans by sweeping up vast troves of telephone records in a dragnet designed to allow it to later make connections between potential terrorist suspects. Well, that is exactly what it's doing. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment, very plain and simple. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And I'm not sure how anyone could ever see it as anything but that. And the fact that there are people who are willing to defend it as not that really tells you something about the character of people who are in Congress presently, and probably for years to come, and always were. People in Congress are not very well known for their high moral sensibilities, so it's not really any surprise. I mean, we have folks like, what's his name? The guy who looks like a turtle. What's his name? Mitch McConnell. There we go. I always think of him as looking sort of like a turtle. Mitch McConnell talking about how great the Patriot Act is and how we need to actually bring it forward. And even I was very, very disappointed actually in the current senator from Tennessee who's talking about how we need to expand the NSA as well. Very disappointed. Well, at the heart of Paul's case is a claim that the NSA is violating constitutional rights, and it definitely is. I don't know how you could see it as doing anything other than that. Well, authority to conduct the programs, according to CNN, exposed by former government contractor Edward Snowden, of course, is set to expire on June the 1st if Congress does not pass new legislation. The House has already overwhelmingly approved a bill to reform the Patriot Act, which would curtail but not end the NSA program. So the notion of reining in the government snooping isn't an outlier, even in GOP circles. But Paul is pushing for more reforms in the Senate version, and he's willing to let NSA authorities sunset altogether if he can't get the overhaul that he is after. If Paul succeeds, The Justice Department has said in a memo to Congress that the telephone metadata program will shut down and that the NSA will begin winding down the program after Friday in order to ensure that it does not engage in any unauthorized collection or use of the metadata on or after June the 1st. Now, there are people who are arguing that it is legal what the NSA is doing. However, a federal appeals court would disagree. They claim that it is, in fact, illegal what the NSA is doing. And even then, it's still a violation of the Fourth Amendment. I mean, plain and simple, it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. That's what I don't get. We keep seeing this where people will defend it saying it's a necessary evil. Well, of course, there's no such thing as a necessary evil anyway. I'm not sure where you get that notion from, but people say, well, the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima were necessary evils. Well, I don't know about that. It doesn't seem that taking out civilian targets makes you any better than the opposition. And that's sort of what we're doing here, where we're saying, look at these totalitarian governments, we're so much better than them, and then we do exactly the same thing that they're doing that we're criticizing them of doing. It seems completely ridiculous, and it's not there's not really any clear solution being offered by anybody in any spectrum of Congress. And you have people who are very prominent who will defend this to the end of time. They'll defend these notions to the end of time that this is the best thing that we can ever do, all these different things. And it just drives me nuts, and it's hidden behind this veil of patriotism where you're somehow unpatriotic or un-American and you should go move somewhere else if you don't like what the NSA is doing. And it's not really that way. I'm not a particularly patriotic person anyway, but even so, it's ridiculous to me the amount of hatred that you get if you dare to defy the NSA spy programs. It's just insane the lengths people will go to defend this. People will actually defend this as being a good and patriotic thing. Well, if you want to call in, you can. It's 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 if you want to call in, and you can do so right here on our radio station's number, which is 423-800-8949 if you want to weigh in on any of the different subjects, which is we're talking a lot about the NSA spying, mostly because it's kind of a big deal, and the news outlets aren't really talking a whole lot about it. What's weird to me, though, is when Edward Snowden came out with his revelations, I suppose, a revelation of Edward Snowden, he was actually given death threats. People actually wanted him dead. It's just crazy how people want this guy dead. In fact, he said he fears for his life, and he's fearing for his life because he didn't really do anything wrong, and yet he's somehow being threatened by people for doing what he thought was right, for actually taking a stance, for actually being moral. He's somehow being seen as just the worst person ever, and somehow unpatriotic as well for his stance on the NSA. Like, could it be that defending the Constitution is a bad thing now in the American political climate? Well, the Daily Mail came out with a story last year, actually almost 2 years ago now, saying, I would love to put a bullet in his head. NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden fears for his life after receiving anonymous death threats from the Pentagon and the NSA. So that doesn't sound very American, right? American intelligence leaker Edward Snowden fears for his life and needs stronger security, his Russian lawyer claimed on Tuesday. Now, this is an old story, of course, but explicit threats to kill him have been made anonymously by Pentagon and National Security Agency officials, alleged Anatoly Kucheriana, saying that there are real threats to his life out there that actually do exist, he said to Vesti. These statements call for physical retribution against Edward Snowden. So Snowden, who is 30, has taken refuge in Moscow to evade treason charges after disclosing U.S. state secrets on NSA intelligence gathering involving the monitoring of millions of phone calls and emails. Now, the funny thing about this to me is that they're wanting to charge him with treason, even though the real treasonous people are the people who are working for the NSA. He broke away from that system, and he's working on trying to make it right, I guess, with these different releases, and yet it's somehow he's being demonized for that. Another source described as a current NSA analyst said, in a world where I would not be restricted from killing an American, I personally would go and kill him myself. A source that was described as a current NSA analyst said last year. So people are very much angry still about Edward Snowden. He says, "We think that the U.S. government must take note of such statements," said the lawyer. "The people who make extremist statements do so while wearing a mask. They do not reveal their identities. But we have some specific publications that printed these interviews, and we will ask for these people's masks to come off. We must know who this NSA officer is who issues orders about ways to eliminate Edward Snowden." The blast came after the heads of congressional intelligence committees in Washington claimed on Sunday that Snowden could have been working in collusion with Russian secret services at the time that he was gathering his treasure trove of classified data. Putin has specifically denied his agents worked with Snowden. Republican Representative Mike Rogers said, "I don't think it was a gee whiz luck event that he ended up in Moscow under the handling of the FSB," said Republican Representative Mike Rogers. Of course, Mike Rogers is one of those guys who refuses to read the whole story because the whole story is that he was actually on his way to I believe Ecuador. It was a country in South Africa, or South America, pardon me, South Africa, a country in South America, which is where Julian Assange was also offered asylum, and that's where he was on his way, but he got stopped in Moscow, unfortunately, while he was on his way there. So that's what happened, and that's why he had to stay in the airport for so long, and it took a long time for them to offer him asylum as well. So he's now been given political asylum, sort of protection against Americans who would seek to kill him, because it seems that quite a few would. And people see Edward Snowden as just this big traitor, and I see him as an American hero. That's the funny thing. People think that he's just the worst guy ever. You have these people in the federal government who think he's just the worst person ever, and I think he's sort of a hero. But the White House today, or actually a few days ago, came out with a Twitter account for the president. And it's actually kind of to be expected that the president would have a Twitter account. I thought he did already, but apparently he doesn't. And now the White House, according to The Verge, doesn't want to waste all of its time blocking racist tweets. Now, there's no denying that President Barack Obama is, in fact, a black man. And that being the case, you're probably going to be facing some racist people online. That's just how it is. There's racist people online. Ooh, man, that's a shocking revelation. Well, 3 days ago, the president got an official presidential Twitter account. In keeping with hallowed internet tradition, a small Twitter welcoming committee celebrated his arrival with the customary recitation of racial epithets and death threats. But it's not funny. It's really not funny. But it's just so typical. But the law can be slow to catch up with web culture, and some people suggested that the Secret Service might actually take these tweeted threats as actual threats, even though they're really probably not. In a press conference today, the White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest wouldn't answer a question about whether the Secret Service is investigating any Twitter threats, but he did express a little bit of weary resignation at the more vulgar tweets, saying, "Those kind of images and that kind of language is all too common on the internet," he says. "I'm sure some of you guys see that on your Twitter feeds as well." Earnest noted that it wasn't too different to what the White House Twitter feed already received, but what we believe is that the president's new Twitter handle is one that can be used to important effect to communicate with the American people and engage the American people, and we're pleased to the early response to it. Okay, so what are they doing about racist or threatening tweets? He says, "My guess is that if we spend a lot of time trying to block these kinds of messages, we probably spend a lot of time blocking people on the internet. And I'll let the Secret Service speak to how they access, or rather assess, these threats and how seriously they need to take them." So the President of the United States might have an entire division of highly trained agents dedicated to protecting his life and one of the world's most competent social media teams. But on the internet, chaos reigns, for good or for ill. And that's kind of a good thing, actually. That's the funny thing. People are so afraid of the internet because it is this bastion of free speech, where you are free to make racist tweets at the president. And on the one hand, racism is not a good thing, obviously. Treating somebody differently simply because of their racial makeup and something, how they were born, they can't help that, is ridiculous and wrong. But it's also protected speech, believe it or not. It's something that is protected under the First Amendment. And on the internet, anything goes. You can be racist on the internet. You can be nice and kind on the internet. You can donate money to cancer research on the internet, or you can donate money to the KKK. It doesn't particularly matter, because that's the internet. The internet is chaos. The internet is anarchy. And I really wouldn't have it any other way. I've been living with the internet for all of my life. I don't know a time before the internet. I was born in 1995. The World Wide Web came around in 94, 95, 96, around that time. I believe 96 is when the world's first web browser came around. So I really don't know a time before the World Wide Web. I certainly don't remember a time before the World Wide Web. And so that's just second nature to me. That's just how the internet is. And the two don't really bleed over. By that, I mean, the internet doesn't really bleed over into the real world in that regard. There are people who are terribly racist online, and then there'll be the most pleasant people you ever meet in real life. And it's kind of weird how that works. It's just, that's the internet. It's anarchy, it's chaos, but you know what? They can do it. It's not that I agree with what they say, with what they say, but I will recognize and defend their right to say it. Because that's the internet. That's life. That's the First Amendment. That's common law. That's just how it is. You can be racist online if you want to, and who's going to tell you to stop? It's free speech, right? Even if it's to the president. You can say what you want to the president. You can say what you want to me on the internet. That's just how it is. That's the internet. That's life on the internet. It's terrible and it's racist, but it's also there's also a lot you can gain from it. You really can't have one without the other. That's just how it is. You can't have the great side of the internet without the bad side of the internet. It's sort of a yin-yang symbiotic relationship. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell, and we'll be coming back in just a few seconds to talk more about this right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of the
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. President Obama is celebrating Jewish American Heritage Month, focusing on the U.S. and Israel's strong relationship amid the world's troubles.
Those shared values compel us to reaffirm that our enduring friendship with the people of Israel and our unbreakable bonds with the state of Israel, that those bonds, that friendship cannot be broken.
The president speaking at an event in Washington. 2 men linked to possible terror-related activities arrested in California.
One at LA International Airport, the other in Orange County. The FBI tells Fox News that both men are from Anaheim and they are both probable cause arrests.
Fox Radio's Tanya J. Powers. A suspect in a quadruple homicide in the nation's capital is expected to appear in court today. Darren Dillon Wint, accused of killing a wealthy Washington, D.C. family and his housekeeper. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
So if you're like me, you're probably a little bit annoyed at what's been going on recently with different revelations about what the NSA has been doing to spy on us. And it really just seems to only get worse as time goes by with more stuff coming out. And it's important to know these things, but it's also important to know that on some level, it doesn't quite matter because the whole system is so insustainable. It kind of has to collapse at some point. It's amazing that it hasn't yet, but on the one hand, you need to be informed, but on the other hand, you need to know that it's sort of a controlled apathy might be the best policy with it. So what we have here is an exploit that the NSA developed for mobile app stores, according to Ars Technica. So in 2011 and 2012, the NSA and the communications intelligence agencies of its Five Eyes allies developed and tested a set of add-ons to their shared internet surveillance capability that could identify and target communications between mobile devices and popular mobile app stores, including those of Google and Samsung, according to an NSA document published by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, or CBC. The targeting capability could have been used to launch man-in-the-middle attacks on mobile app downloads, allowing the NSA and other agencies to install code on targeted devices and gather intelligence on their users. The document, a 2012 National Security Agency presentation obtained from former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, details efforts by the NSA, Canada's Communications Security Establishment, or CSE, and other Five Eyes allies to identify the fingerprints of communications between mobile devices and app stores. The capabilities were developed during two collaborative workshops, one in November of 2011, hosted by the Australian Signals Directorate, and the other hosted by Canada's CSE in February of 2012. The February workshop was attended by analysts from all of the Five Eyes communications intelligence agencies. The NSA slides joked as everyone wanted to experience a Canadian winter. The fingerprints were turned into mini plugins for X-Keyscore, the NSA's worldwide distributed internet surveillance system. X-Keyscore can apply these plugin rules to search through streams of internet traffic searching for matching data, and it has been used as a targeting system for various types of network exploit attacks, including the quantum man-in-the-middle attacks that allow agencies to hijack or modify traffic between a computer or device of interest and various web services to decrypt it, to insert malware into the stream, or to present altered versions of the content. So for some reason, the NSA thinks that it is okay. The folks in the NSA think that it's all right to hack into people's communications and to alter them with their own little bits of code. That doesn't seem quite right to me, right? Like, this seems to be a little bit out there. You know, this seems to be a little bit kind of illegal. You know, almost like alteration of property, which can be seen as theft. Well, that's like if you have your own yard. You know, you have a house and a yard, and the government pulls up and sticks a sign in your yard and drives off. And if you try to remove it, they'll arrest you. That's sort of what they've done here. Or they've taken communications between you and your provider or what have you, or your provider and you, and they've altered it somehow in order to track it, in order to track your information. That's similar to like if the FBI started putting GPS tracking devices on different vehicles owned by Arab Americans. Oh, wait, they've done that. A little bit weird, huh? You know, they've actually done that. That's a weird thing. They actually did put GPS trackers on people's cars because they were worried about them being potential domestic terrorists, despite the fact that they're just regular college students. Ethnicity shouldn't really have much of anything to do with that, but for some reason it does for the FBI. They're very racist over at the FBI, it would seem. According to the NSA presentation by the agency's Network Tradecraft Advancement Team, those techniques included 17 X-Keyscore filters that were developed for identifying App Store traffic in non-Five Eyes countries. There were fingerprints based on the Google and Samsung App Store protocols. Google's App Store server in France was identified as an aggregation point for some of the targeted countries, as well as other application servers frequently connected to by mobile phone devices in those countries, including Congo, Senegal, and Sudan. Those included app stores hosted by providers in Cuba, Russia, Switzerland, Morocco, the Netherlands, the Bahamas, and Senegal. The operation found a number of servers that were ripe for man-in-the-middle attacks, launching effects attacks on mobile devices and collecting device user identification and other data from information both moving between the stores and the mobile device and on the client device itself. For example, data collected by the CSE during Op Irritant Horn included the International Mobile Subscriber Identity, or IMSI, and phone model data for customers of telecom provider Wired Congo, identifying the ZTE S213 feature phone as the most popular handset in the Congo. So, for some odd reason, people will defend this as being okay and say that, well, so long as it stops some act of terror, it's kind of okay. And it's kind of a nonsense argument, actually, when you think about it. Especially when you hear the argument that, well, if you haven't done anything wrong, then you have nothing to worry about. Well, that's another nonsense argument where they say, if you've done nothing wrong, you should have nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide. I've done nothing wrong. That's such a nonsense argument because it's a system of principles that we should be talking about, not, well, if I've done something wrong, then you can come looking at me sort of thing. Where we're talking about principles here. We're talking about morals. And people who would make this argument, I would say, don't really have much of a moral compass if they think that it's okay to spy on people, even if they've done nothing wrong. This seems to be kind of a nonsense, really, when it comes right down to it. It seems to be a little bit contradictory as well, where people say that imagine if, okay, let's put it this way. Imagine if the Iranians were doing exactly the same thing for the protection of their people, and we would get all mad about that. We'd say, how dare they? But Americans, for some reason, we have the so-called moral authority to do whatever we want. We have the moral authority to invade people's privacy because we're the good guys. This makes no sense. There should be a standard system of morals throughout different countries. It doesn't matter if we're the United States or if they're around. Wrong is wrong and right is right. So if we do something that we would see to be wrong if they did it, then we shouldn't be doing it either. It's pretty simple, actually. It's like nuclear weapons. Who are we to own nuclear weapons? If we can own nuclear weapons, they should be able to own nuclear weapons. We're not going to use it any better than we will, or any better than they will. You see, it's the exact same argument, and it's so silly. It's so silly that people will argue that they shouldn't have nuclear weapons, but we should. It's like they should never be used, but for some reason it's okay if we have them, just in case. It's entirely wrong, but we have the moral authority to use them. It makes no sense at all. People think that we're so high and mighty, having the moral authority to do all these different things, when in actuality we probably don't have much moral authority at all, because we're very contradictory and we're very hypocritical with a lot of our actions. It's really quite ridiculous, a lot of the things we've done. Well, researchers are now raising questions about age-reversing proteins. So about a year ago, according to Ars Technica, a series of startling papers came out, and they described how a single protein circulating in the blood of young mice can impose youth on the organs of older mice. Effects were found on muscles such as the heart and the brain, which is not a muscle, all of which appeared to revert to a more youthful state following exposure to the signaling protein GDF11. At the time, the results seemed to be a solid extension of a lot of incremental work, and it was obvious that a lot of labs would be would be interested in following up on this, given the potential implications of finding it. So we shouldn't have expected to wait very long to see whether GDF11 is really everything it appeared to be, and now some of the first results are in, and they don't seem that promising. And it seems to be that way all the time. Whenever there's some sort of new special miracle protein that's going to reverse aging or whatever, that always turns out to not be the case, because reversing aging is a silly concept, and it's really not worth our time. We should more focus on what we can do here and now, as opposed to how we can keep ourselves from aging, because aging is just a natural part of life. And for some reason, people are afraid to die, and I'm not sure why. Well, Automax is a great place to get a car. They don't care if you have bad credit or no credit, if you're in bankruptcy or what have you. It's a car lot where they have top quality used cars that are $2,000, sometimes less than other lots. It's an unpretentious little car lot just past or east of the Central High on Highway 58. They have low overhead, no staff. The guy does it all himself. He passes the savings on to you. Everyone could get a car and rebuild credit at Automax. That's Automax at 643-2886. That's 643-2886. Ask for Louis, and he's our contact there at Automax. So definitely check him out if you're looking to get a new car. Even if you have bad credit, he'll still take you. Or if you're a new buyer and you don't have any credit, or if you've gone bankrupt, he'll still take you, and you can rebuild your credit buying your car from him, because he does report to the credit agency. So it's a great way to rebuild your credit score, and you can do that with Louis from Automax. And tell them that we sent you here from Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. And this is AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, and we're everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is on Twitter, where you report the world of science. It's AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, and you can save half off now. Go to hotnewstalkradio.com, click on the half off link for great deals. Hot News Talk Radio saves you money. That's AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. And so there's a lot going on in the news regarding the NSA, and there's not nearly as much as there should be. That's kind of the funny thing. You'd think that there'd be a lot regarding the Patriot Act and how they're wanting to reauthorize it and how it's a threat to Americans' privacy and all that sort of thing, but nobody's really willing to talk about that angle. And I don't really know why. I'm really unsure of why people are unwilling to really rein in that issue and talk about it in any sort of meaningful way. For some reason, people are kind of afraid of that. I'm not sure why. It's seeming like people are wanting to pander. People are wanting to pander to the government or to the federal system or to the state or what have you, to the intelligence community, because they have this odd idea that they can do no wrong. You know, if they do some horrible atrocity, well, you know what? It was all for the greater good, and we should just be thankful that they did what they did because we'd be unwilling to do it. You know, that's always the mentality. It's this bizarre nationalistic, uber patriotic mentality that's not really going to get us anywhere. You know, this idea is not really going to get us anywhere as a people, where we think that the state can do no wrong and everything they ever do is the best thing ever. And if they blow up some village and kill a bunch of civilians, well, you know what? It was probably to hunt down some major bad terrorists, so it's all okay. And this is the wrong mentality to have, where we have this odd idea, this odd state of mind here, where we think that anything the state does is probably okay, because even if it seems to be completely outrageous and makes no sense at all to us, it's probably for a good reason that they did it. You know, that's always the idea that we have, where it's, well, you know what? They did this this really ridiculous thing that killed a lot of people, and it was completely irresponsible. But you know what? It was probably because they had a good reason to do it. Like we've blown up civilian airliners before, and people will defend that, saying, "Well, you know what? It was probably carrying weapons of some sort." So it's so contradictory. When another country blows up an airliner full of people, we say it's the most heinous act of terrorism ever, and then we do exactly the same thing, like we did with the Iranians, and we'll say that it was a legitimate target because there's an F-16 tailing behind it. That doesn't really make much of a difference. Well, actually, it wasn't an F-16. Excuse me, it was a MiG, of course, because they get supplied by the Soviets back then. But still, it's a ridiculous comparison. It's ridiculous to say that they're okay in blowing, or we're okay in blowing up jetliners, but they're not because they are the bad guys. You know, we're the good guys, so we can do whatever we want to, and they're the bad guys, and they're also Muslim. So anything they do is just the worst thing ever. And we have this sense of sort of a double morality system where anything we do is okay, and anything they do is wrong, no matter what their position may be on that. And it's such a silly position to have, but we constantly have that idea. And I'm not sure why. So many people have that idea. They have this uber patriotic idea. And if you ever question them, they'll say, well, I support America. Like, okay, well, I mean, so do I. I support American businesses. I support American people. I support the idea of a lot of the systems that are behind American ideology, I suppose, such as, you know, a free market system. That's kind of American. Ideas of free speech, those are pretty American. So yeah, I guess I support America too. When they say, well, I support the intelligence community because they're constantly going out there doing things that we couldn't do to support us and to protect our lives and our livelihood. So I guess it's okay to commit atrocities so long as it's to protect other people. Oh, I see now. Now it all makes sense. Well, this is all getting very dark and very, very dismal, and it really doesn't need to be, because we have to realize something that isn't pointed out often enough, which is that the whole thing is doomed to fail. And that's okay. That's actually good that this is all doomed to fail. It's doomed to collapse. The federal system is doomed to collapse, and the international monetary systems are doomed to collapse. And that's all okay. You know, people are kind of afraid of that, and I'm really not. I see this as a sort of a phoenix type situation where it's a chance for a new beginning, or it's a chance to rebuild or not to rebuild at all, which might be the better option, actually, if we're talking about a federal monetary institution. But it's a chance to focus more on local economy, which we should be doing already. In fact, focusing on local economy is probably one of the better ways to prep. You know, you hear about the prepper community all the time. This is a great way to do that because this ensures that our area prospers while the federal system collapses. But we'll be okay because we have local businesses and we have a local economy that's strong and is very well suited for any sort of financial collapse on the national side. Well, think about it in 2008. Where we had a horrible collapse in 2008 with the monetary system, the housing market crashed. But locally, yeah, sure, a lot of people were hurt because people invested nationally. But, you know, businesses still worked out here. 2008 was a hard year for everybody. 2009 was a really bad year for everybody. But there are people who managed to work through it. International institutions didn't make it through, but a lot of local businesses did. I don't know of many local businesses, if any, that failed as a result of the 2008 market crash. So we're doing quite well. And if there was another one, I think we would do quite well yet again. Local economy and investing in local economy is a good way to prep. It's probably one of the best ways to prep. I'm not a very firm believer in some sort of cataclysm that will occur that's going to cause there to be a collapse of government, or that'll cause there to be some sort of some sort of crisis where there'll be roving bands of looters and robbers and such, kind of like the Mad Max movies. Now, I really like the Mad Max movies, don't get me wrong, but it's fiction. And I kind of think that that idea is fiction too, where for some reason, if there ceased to be a government, everyone would just turn into this evil human being who wants to kill everybody and loot and rob and such. And I don't know about you, but if there's a collapse of government, I would still be me. I'd still be Russell. I'd still be a relatively good-natured guy who doesn't really want to hurt anybody. And Mr. Tullis, David Tullis of Nuganomics.com, he's the most good-natured guy I know. He'd never raised a hand to anybody that I know of. Not me yet, anyway. And and I don't think he would turn into some raving lunatic if there's collapse of government, and neither would you. You see, that's sort of the nonsense in that argument, I think. And of course, we all have weapons to protect ourselves as well, because that's a good investment as well, is a weapon. Especially if you buy from a local economy player, a local gun shop, it's a good way to support yourself, and it's a good investment. You know, a lot of people don't think of weapons as investments, but they kind of are. Some of them will appreciate in value significantly. Look at how Mosin Nagants have been going. Or it used to be you could buy a whole pallet of them for a few $100s, and now one of them is going for sometimes $200. It's really weird. So you can actually turn a pretty good profit. Weapons are a good investment, and it's good to keep yourself armed anyway, just in case, for home protection purposes, of course, just in case. It's always good to keep yourself in that mindset of self-protection and protection of your neighbors as well. A teen now has pled guilty to 23 charges of swatting, which is he did it to harass online game rivals. Now, swatting is a practice where you know your friend's address or your particular rival's address. You call 911 and say that you're at this address and you have a gun and you're going to kill your family. You know, you're armed and you're dangerous. And so you call 911, you tell them all that, and you hang up, and they send a SWAT team to that particular house and break down the door. I don't know of anybody who's died yet as a result of this, but I'm amazed nobody has yet, and I haven't heard about it. Well, on Wednesday, a Canadian 17-year-old pleaded guilty to 23 charges, according to Ars Technica, relating to swatting calls and other false police reports. Now, it is a crime, of course, to file a false police report, many of which had targeted his online opponents in the video game called League of Legends, which is a really, really popular video game online. People play it on their computers all the time. It's actually a modification of Dota 2, if I remember correctly, but that's not really important. According to a lengthy report by Canadian publication Tri-City News, the prosecution's case against the Coquitlam, British Columbia teenager. That's the name of the city he lives in British Columbia. That teenager asserted that the teen, whose name wasn't released due to his age, he's under 18, targeted mostly young female gamers who declined or ignored his friend requests on League of Legends and Twitter. This is the most jealous guy I've ever heard of. The most notable example was a University of Arizona in Tucson college student who dropped out after she and her family members had been victimized by repeated swatting calls, including this nearly simultaneous attack on both the woman and her parents, which there's documents of on YouTube, financial information theft, text bombs, false cell phone service orders, and intrusions into her email and Twitter accounts. According to prosecutors, the months of attacks against this woman began on September the 16th, when the teen called Tucson police as if he were at her address, claiming that he had shot her parents or his parents with an AR-15 rifle, had bombs, and would kill the police if he saw any marked vehicles, the statement reported. So naturally, the SWAT teams responded and broke into the house and amazingly didn't kill anybody. So I guess I'm somewhat proud of the SWAT members for not shooting anybody as a result of that. But geez Louise, man. I mean, that's pretty harsh there. So what's a good solution for this? Well, chances are most people don't have a very secure password. In fact, a lot of people don't have very secure passwords for their different accounts online. Now, a good way to secure your password is to put what's called a unique character or a special character into your password, such as an exclamation point, hashtag. The pound symbol, of course, is also known as a hashtag, a @ symbol, what have you, something like that. Even quotes, putting your password in quotes can be help. Any sort of thing like that can really help you to boost your password security. Don't make it your birthday. That's a very bad idea. Don't make it your pet's name, because that's also a bad idea. And there's all sorts of different things that are very bad ideas, but just make it some weird word and a number in front of or behind it, and with a special character in front of it as well, or behind it or in the middle of it or what have you. And that'll really help you to protect your passwords and your accounts remain secure, because chances are actually this poor young lady didn't have that situation where she had a very secure password. I don't know how he managed to get her password, but apparently he did, and signed her up for a lot of different things that she didn't want. The user, who identified himself in a video as a member of a Lizard Squad, went by the handles Obnoxious and internet something, was arrested 8 days later in his hometown in British Columbia. That arrest, according to a Polk County Sheriff's Office press release, not Polk County here, of course, came after local authorities were tipped off about 2 fake bomb threats that he called into an Orlando area high school in September and October, which he called in after telling his juvenile victim that he was going to SWAT his school. The case against this swatting team was stacked with even more stories of false reports, including him admitting to having played in a 2013 bomb threat to Disneyland that targeted its Space Mountain ride. That's amazing what somebody can do with just a phone and access to the internet. You can call in bomb threats. You can have people physically move from their location. You can actually make somebody go somewhere because of what you say on the internet. It's really weird. It's just a weird situation. Well, Comcast has ended an interconnection plan that they had due to net neutrality, they're claiming. So Comcast, in yet another example, potentially of businesses getting hurt by net neutrality, is fighting for before net neutrality takes effect. Comcast has signed an interconnection agreement with Internet Backbone Operator Level 3 with just a few weeks to go until the Federal Communications Commission starts taking complaints under its new net neutrality regime. Comcast in Level 3 fought as early, I should say, as 2010 over the amount Netflix traffic that Level 3 was sending into Comcast network. Level 3 then agreed to pay Comcast for network interconnection at the time under protest. Level 3 and Comcast announced another agreement in 2013 in a brief press release containing no details, but there was apparently still some tension between the two companies. You see, Netflix accounts for a huge percentage of internet traffic, and it costs a whole heck of a lot to keep this Netflix traffic up and going. And so it costs these companies money. Now, wouldn't it be fair for these companies to charge Netflix extra money because it costs them a lot of money? Like you would understand that. It kind of makes sense. But Netflix, the folks over at Netflix are kind of tech savvy and understand how to lobby. And they figured out that, hey, if we complain and say this is unfair or discrimination, what have you, maybe we can get this rescinded. Maybe we can start up a new trend and call it net neutrality. And that's sort of what's happened. And it seems that net neutrality is just an attempt by the FCC to gain access and claim jurisdiction over the internet, which is really a nationless thing. The internet can't really be claimed by any nation. Yeah, we can say that it was built by government researchers back in the 60s, but that was back in the 60s. The internet is not all the same as it was back then. You really can't claim that the internet is a product of, or even a invention of, or owned by the United States government. That's a ridiculous claim and one that really shouldn't be made. Well, this is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. The show we talk about technology and quite a bit more. This is AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, and we are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is on Twitter, where you report the world decides. AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. You can save half off now. Go to hotnewstalkradio.com. Click on the half off link for great deals. Hot News Talk Radio saves you money. That's AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio, and Nuganomics.com with David Toole. This is coming up in just a few. Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is the Mom World.